Welcome to Den's Descends. Today we're going to be discussing the Ancient Sumerians. Just a brief overview. I'm not going to dive too deep into one particular area or another or subject of this civilization. We're going to be doing that on future videos, but rather right now I just wanted to give you a basic idea about who the Sumerians were, where they came from, and how they contributed to what we know as modern civilization today. Also, I hope to answer the very rarely asked question, did they indeed invent the Nintendo Entertainment System? Perhaps that last question was complete nonsense, but nevertheless, let's get into it. Sumer. Now, that was the southernmost region of ancient Mesopotamia, which is modern-day Iraq and Kuwait. It's generally considered the cradle of civilization. The name comes from the Akkadian, the language of the north of Mesopotamia, and means the land of the civilized kings. The Sumerians called themselves the black-headed people, and their land in cuneiform script was simply the land, or the land of the black-headed people. And in the biblical book of Genesis, Sumer is known as Shinar. That might be pronounced Shinar. I believe it's Shinar, but if anybody knows, let me know in the comments below. According to the Sumerian king list, when the gods first gave human beings the gifts necessary for cultivating society, they did so by establishing the city of Eridu in the region of Sumer. While the Sumerian city of Uruk is held to be the oldest city in the world, the ancient Mesopotamians believed that it was Eridu, and that it was here that order was established and civilization began. Uruk was one of the most important cities, at one time the most important, in ancient Mesopotamia. According to the Sumerian king list, it was founded by King Enmerkar, sometime around 4500 BC. Located in the southern region of Sumer, modern-day Warka, Iraq, Uruk was known in the Aramaic language as Erik, which it is believed gave rise to the modern name for the country of Iraq, or Iraq. Although another likely derivation is Al-Iraq, the Arabic name for the region of Babylonia. The city of Uruk is most famous for its great king Gilgamesh and the epic tale of his quest for immortality, but also for a number of its firsts in the development of civilization which occurred there. Also, it could be the place where the first Nintendo factory was located. I couldn't find a lot of information about this obviously true fact on the internet, or in any books or any place in the universe. Maybe it's not true, but I'm holding out hope that it is. Let's continue. The region of Sumer was long thought to have been first inhabited around 4500 BC. This date has been contested in recent years, and is now thought that human activity in the area began much earlier. The first settlers were not Sumerians, but a people of unknown origin whom archaeologists have termed the Ubaid people, from the excavated mound Al-Ubaid, where the artifacts were uncovered which first attested to their existence. Or perhaps Proto-Euphrateans, which designates them as earlier inhabitants of the region of the Euphrates River. Whoever these people were, they had already moved from a hunter-gatherer society to an agrarian one prior to 5000 BC. Excavations from Al-Ubaid and other sites throughout southern Iraq have uncovered stone tools from the Ubaid people, such as hoes, knives, adzes, and clay artifacts, which included sickles, bricks, painted pottery, and figurines. These people were the first agents of civilization in the region. At what point the people who came to be known as Sumerians entered the area is not known, at least not to us. I'm sure they knew, or maybe they didn't. They were too busy playing Nintendo. According to the scholar Samuel Noah Kramer, The first ruler of Sumer, whose deeds are recorded, if only in the briefest kind of statement, is a king by the name of Etana of Kish, who may have come to the throne quite early in the 3rd millennium BC. In the king list, he is described as he who stabilized all the lands. The Sumerian king list is a cuneiform document written by a scribe of the city of Lagash, sometime around 2100 BC, which lists all the kings of the region and their accomplishments in an attempt to show community of order in society dating back to the beginning of civilization. As the Mesopotamians generally, and the Sumerians specifically, believed that the civilization was the result of the gods' triumph over chaos, the king's list is thought to have been created to legitimize the reign of a king named Utu-Hagal of Uruk, around 2100 BC, by showing him as the most recent in a long line of rulers of the region. Etana is famous from the myth of the man who ascends to the heavens on the back of an eagle, and, like other kings mentioned in the list, was known for superhuman feats and heroism. Utu-Hagal, it is thought, was trying to link himself to such earlier hero kings through the creation of the king list, since the Mesopotamians believed that the gods had set everything in motion, and that human beings were created as co-laborers with the gods to maintain order and hold back chaos. The early writers of history in the region concentrated more on the links between the rulers and their gods. Writing down the history of human accomplishments seems to have been considered a matter of little importance for these writers, and as a result, the early history of Sumer has been deduced from the archaeological and geological record more than a written tradition, and much information is still unavailable to modern scholars. Whenever the Sumerian civilization was first established in the region, by 3600 BC, they'd invented the wheel, writing, the sailboat, agricultural processes such as irrigation, and the concept of a city. Although China and India also lay claim to the first cities in the world. It's generally accepted that the first cities in the world rose in Sumer, and among the most important were Eridu, Uruk, Larsa, Isin, Adab, Kula, Lagash, Nippur, and Kish. The city of Uruk is held to be the first true city in the world. It has been noted again by Kramer that these names are not Sumerian but come from the Ubaid people, and so were founded, at least as villages, much earlier than 5000 BC. Other cities in Sumer were Sipar, Shurupak, Bad Tibira, Girsu, Uma, Urukag, Nina, and Kisura. All were of varying size and scope, with Uruk being the largest and most powerful at its prime. With the establishment of the cities of Sumer, their history unfolds from approximately 5000 BC to 1750 BC, when the Sumerians ceased to exist as a people, after Sumer was invaded by the Elamites and Amorites. After the Ubaid period came the Uruk people, in which cities began to emerge across the landscape, and the city of Uruk rose in prominence. Though the period is named for the first city of Uruk, Eridu was considered the first city by the Sumerians themselves. Trade was firmly established with foreign lands at this time, and writing evolved from pictograms to cuneiform script. It is thought that cuneiform script was the scripting language in which the first ever Nintendo games were coded. It is believed that the first game they created for the console was Super Mario Bros. Or maybe that's complete nonsense. I'm actually going to stop with this Nintendo stuff for now. Unless anybody can tell me if I'm maybe onto something here. I don't know. Let me know in the comments. At any rate, it is thought that trade was the main motivator in the development of writing, as there now had to be some means for accurate long-distance communication between the merchants of Sumer and their agents abroad. The kingship also arose at this time, and the city-states of Sumer came to be ruled by a single monarch, who was assisted by a council of elders which included both men and women. The kings following Etana were Semites, not Sumerians, as attested to by their names, such as Enmebaragizi of Kish. It is not until after the rule of 8 kings passed that Sumerian names began to appear on the king list. The early dynastic period, from around 2900 to 2334 BC, saw the subtle shift from a priest king, known as an Ensi, to a more modern-day concept of king, known as Lugal, or big man. The city-states of Sumer during this time fought for control of land and water rights until the rise of the first dynasty of Lagash in 2500 BC. Under their king, Eannutum, Lagash became the center of a small empire which included most of Sumer and parts of neighboring Elam. This empire was still in existence under the king Lugal-Zagi when a young man who later claimed to have been the king's gardener seized the throne. This young man was Sargon of Akkad, who would go on to found the Akkadian Empire, the first multinational empire in the world, and it is thought it was based on the model set by Eannutum. The Akkadian Empire ruled over the majority of Mesopotamia, including Sumer, until a people known as the Gutians invaded from the north, the area of modern-day Iran, and destroyed the major cities. The Gutian period, roughly 2218 to 2047 BC, is considered a dark age in Sumerian history and Mesopotamian history overall, and the Gutians were universally reviled by the Sumerian writers in later histories, most of which consider them a punishment sent by the gods. The last period in Sumerian history is known as the Ur-III period, so named for the third dynasty of the city of Ur. This period is also known as the Sumerian Resistance due to the remarkable advances in culture, touching upon virtually every single aspect of civilized human life, which were made. The kings of Ur-Nammu and Shulgi, set cultural advancement as the goal of their administrations and maintained a peace which allowed for art and technology to flourish. Whether invented before or during the Ur-III period, the tools, concepts, and technological innovations in place during the Third Dynasty of Ur solidified the Sumerians' place in history as the creators of civilization as we know it. In Samuel Noah Kramer's book, History Begins at Sumer, he lists 39 firsts in history from the region, among which are the first schools, the first proverbs and sayings, the first messiahs, the first Noah, and the first flood stories, the first love song, the first aquarium, the first legal precedents in court cases, the first tale of a dying and resurrected God, the first funeral chants, the first biblical parallels, and first moral ideas. They also invented the first beer. We'll do a deeper dive on that one in an upcoming video. The Sumerians also essentially invented time in that their sexagesimal system of counting, which is a system based on the number 60, created the 60-second minute and the 60-minute hour. They also divided the night and day into periods of 12 hours, set a limit on a workday with a time for beginning and ending, and established the concept of days off for holidays. The historian Bertman writes, "The hand of Mesopotamia still determines the hourly length of the traditional workday and even the length of our electronic entertainment when our workday is stopped." Bertman further notes that the modern-day practice of checking one's horoscope comes from ancient Sumer, and that the astrological signs one is born under were first noted and named by the ancient Mesopotamians. Ur-Nammu wrote the first legal code in Sumer, which became the precedent for the much later and better known Code of Hammurabi of Babylon. The historian Paul Krikwyzek writes, Ur-Nammu's universal legal pronouncements present a good example of the unifying drive of Ur's kings, the compulsion to regulate every aspect of life. Sumer, under the unifying force of the third dynasty of Ur, became a patrimonial state, meaning one constructed on the pattern of the patriarchal family ruled by a father figure, in which the monarch served as the father figure who guided his children along the proper path toward prosperity. Ur-Nammu's son, Shulgi, is considered the greatest of the Neo-Sumerian kings who continued his father's policies but went further. In an effort to both impress his people and distinguish himself from his father, Shulgi ran 100 miles, or 160.9 kilometers, between the religious center of Nippur and the capital city of Ur and back again in one day, in order to officiate at the festivals in both cities. Though some have considered the hymn, which recounts his achievements as a kingly boast and highly exaggerated, scholars have determined that he could in fact have made his famous run, and also that it was keeping within the spirit of Shulgi's rule. Creating a sense of awe and admiration in their subjects seems to have been central to the governing power of kings of Ur at this time. Under Shulgi's reign, a wall was constructed 155 miles long, or 250 kilometers, to keep out the Semitic-speaking tribes known as the Martu, or Tidnum, but better known by their biblical name of Amorites. Shulgi's son, grandson, and great-grandson all renovated and strengthened the wall to keep those they called the barbarians out of Sumer proper, but the barrier proved ineffective. The wall could not be properly manned or maintained, and further was not anchored to any solid barrier at the endpoints, and so invaders could simply follow the wall on the one side to either endpoint and then walk around it. Seems pretty effective. The forces of neighboring Elam breached the wall and marched on Ur, sacking it and carrying away the king around 1750 BC. The Amorites now established themselves in the land, but with the fall of Ur and a severe famine resulting from a change in climate and the overuse of the land, many migrated for points south. Among these migrating Amorites, it was thought, was Abraham, the patriarch who left Ur to settle in the land of Canaan. Following the Ur III period and the fall of Ur, many Sumerians migrated north. Sumerian was no longer spoken as a language, although it was still written, having been largely replaced by the Semitic Akkadian, and the Sumerian culture was ended. Their legacy, however, continues in many aspects of civilization, which those in the modern day take for granted as always existing. Even so, something as basic as the 24-hour day was invented once upon a time in Sumer. I hope you enjoyed this brief look into the history of ancient Sumeria. I plan on diving deeper into different aspects of the Sumerians in future videos, so please stay tuned for that. If you like this video, please give a like and a subscribe. It would definitely help us out. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.